Good morning, ladies. Today we're going to read Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time, there lived a poor widow who had an only son named Jack. She was very poor, for times had been hard and Jack was too young to work. Almost all of the furniture in the little cottage had been sold to buy bread, until at last there was nothing left worth selling. Only the good cow, Milky White, remained, and she gave milk every morning, which they took to market and sold. But one sad day Milky White gave no milk, and then things looked bad indeed. "Never mind, mother," said Jack. "We must sell Milky White. Trust me to make a good bargain." And away he went to the market. For some time he went along very sadly, but after a little while he recovered his spirits. "I may as well ride as walk," he said. So instead of leading the cow by the halter, he jumped on her back, and so he went whistling along until he met a butcher. "Good morning," said the butcher. "Good morning, sir," answered Jack. "Where are you going?" said the butcher. "I'm going to market to sell the cow." "It's lucky I met you," said the butcher. "You may save yourself the trouble of going so far." Well, he put his hand in his pocket and pulled out 5 curious-looking beans. "What do you call these?" he said. "Beans," said Jack. "Yes," he said, "beans, but they're the most wonderful beans that have ever were known. If you plant them overnight, by the next morning they'll grow up and reach the sky. But to save you the trouble of going all the way to the market, I don't mind exchanging them for your cow of yours." "Done," cried Jack, who was so delighted with the bargain that he ran all the way home to tell his mother how lucky he had been. But oh, how disappointed was the poor widow. "Off to bed with you," she cried, and she was so angry that she threw the beans out in the window of the garden. So poor Jack went to bed without any supper and cried himself to sleep. When he woke the next morning, the room was almost dark, and Jack jumped out of his bed and ran to the window to see what was the matter. The sun was shining brightly outside, but from the ground right up beside his window there was growing a great beanstalk, which stretched up and up as far as he could see into the sky. "I'll just see where it leads to," thought Jack, and with that he stepped out of the window onto the beanstalk and began to climb upwards. He climbed up and up until, after a time, his mother's cottage looked like a mere speck below. But at last the stalk ended, and he found himself in a new and beautiful country. A little way off the great castle there was a broad road leading straight up to the front gate. But what most surprised Jack was to find a beautiful maiden suddenly standing beside him. "Good morning, ma'am," he said very politely. "Good morning, Jack," she said, and Jack was more surprised than ever, for he could not imagine how she had learned his name. But soon she found that she knew a great deal more about him than his name, for she told him how, when he was quite a little baby, his father, a gallant knight, had been slain by the giant who lived in yonder castle. Now his mother, in order to save Jack, had been obliged to promise never to tell the secret. "All that giant has is yours," she said, and then disappeared quite as suddenly as she came. "She must be a fairy," thought Jack. As he drew near the castle, he saw the giant's wife standing at the door. "If you please, ma'am," he said, "would you kindly give me some breakfast? I have had nothing to eat since yesterday." Now the giant's wife, although very big and very ugly, had a kind heart. So she said, "Very well, little man, come in. You must be quick about it, for if my husband the giant finds you here, he will eat you up, bones and all." Oh my goodness gracious. So Jack went in. The giant's wife gave him a good breakfast, but before he had half finished it, there came a terrible knock at the front door, which seemed to shake even the thick walls of the castle. "Dearie me, that's my husband," said the giantess in a terrible fright. "We must hide you somehow." and she lifted Jack up and popped him into the empty kettle. No sooner had the giant's wife opened the door than her husband roared out, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "It's a boy, I'm sure it is," he continued. "Where is he? I'll have him for my breakfast." "Nonsense," said his wife. "You must be mistaken. It's the ox hide you smell." So he sat down and ate up the greater part of an ox. For when he finished, he said, "Wife, bring me my money bags." So his wife brought him 2 full bags of gold, and the giant began to count his money. But he was so sleepy that his head soon began to nod, and then he began to snore like the rumbling of thunder. Then Jack crept out, snatched up the 2 bags, and thought the giant's dog barked loudly. Though the giant's dog barked loudly, he made his way down the beanstalk back to the cottage before the giant awoke. Jack and his mother were now quite rich, but it occurred to him that one day he would like to see how matters were going on up at the giant's castle. So while his mother was away at the market, he climbed up and up and up and up, till he got to the top of the beanstalk again. The giantess was standing at the door, just as before, but she did not know Jack, who, of course, was more finely dressed than on his first visit. "If you please, ma'am," he said, "will you give me some breakfast?" "Run away," she said, "or my husband, the giant, will eat you up, bones and all. The last boy who came around here stole 2 bags of gold. Off with you." But the giantess had a kind heart, and after a time she allowed Jack to come into the kitchen, where she set before him enough breakfast to last him a week. Scarcely he began to eat. Then there was a great rumbling like an earthquake, and the giantess only had time to bundle Jack into the oven when in came the giant. No sooner was he inside the room than he roared, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." But his wife told him that he was mistaken, and after breakfasting off a roasted bullock, just as if it were a lark, he called out, "Wife, bring that little brown hen." The giantess went out and brought him a little brown hen, which she placed on the table. "Lay," said the giant, and the hen at once laid a golden egg. "Lay," said the giant 2nd time, and she laid another golden egg. "Lay," said the giant a 3rd time, and she laid a 3rd golden egg. "That will do for today," he said, and he stretched himself out to sleep. As soon as he began to snore, Jack crept out of the oven, went on a tiptoe to the table, and, snatching up the little brown hen, made a dash for the door. Then the hen began to cackle, and the giant began to wake up, but before he was quite awake, Jack had escaped from the castle, and, climbing as fast as he could down the beanstalk, got safe home to his mother's cottage. The little brown hen laid so many golden eggs that Jack and his mother now had more money than they could spend. But Jack was always thinking about the beanstalk, and one day he crept out of the window again and climbed up and up and up and up until he reached the top. This time, you may be sure, he was careful not to be seen, so he crept round the back of the castle, and when the giant's wife went out, he slipped into the kitchen and hid himself in the oven. In came the giant, roaring louder than ever, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." But the giantess was quite sure that he had seen no little boys that morning, and after grumbling a great deal, the giant sat down to breakfast, even though he was not quite satisfied, for every now and then he would say, can we guess it? "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman." And once he got up and looked in the kettle, but of course Jack was in the oven all the time. When the giant had finished, he called out, "Wife, bring me the golden harp." So she brought the golden harp and placed it on the table. "Sing," said the giant, and the harp at once began to sing the most beautiful songs that were ever heard. It sang so sweetly that the giant soon fell asleep, and then Jack crept out quietly of the oven, and going on to his tiptoe, seized the hold of the golden harp. But the harp at once called out, "Master, master!" and the giant woke up in time to catch sight of Jack running out the kitchen door. With a fearful roar, he seized his oak tree club, and he dashed after Jack, who held the harp tight and ran faster than he had ever run before. The giant, brandishing his club and taking terribly long strides, gained on Jack at every instant. And he would have caught if the giant had slipped over a boulder before he could pick himself up. Jack began to climb down the beanstalk, and when the giant arrived at the edge, he was nearly halfway down to the cottage. The giant began to climb down too, but as soon as Jack saw him coming, he called out to, "Mother, bring me an axe!" And the widow hurried out with a chopper. Jack had no sooner reached the ground that he had cut the beanstalk right in two. Down came the giant with a terrible crash, and that, you may be sure, was the end of him. What became of the giantess in the castle? Nobody knows. But Jack and his mother grew very rich and lived happily ever after. All right, ladies, so now that you've heard the read aloud from Miss Egging, be sure to go and take the quiz. So again, we have a couple multiple choice, and I'll show you what they look like here. I'm on the ReadWorks website, Jack and the Beanstalk, so make sure that you go to that site, go into our classroom, and you'll be able to click on the assignment and then take the quiz after you do your reread. And please be advised that at the end here, after your multiple choice questions, you do have a couple short responses. So what did Jack take from the giant? What might have motivated Jack to visit the giant's castle? And then explain what thing, person, or event was the key to Jack and his mother becoming rich. So again, make sure that you do the written answer for questions 8, 9, and 10, and then again your multiple choice. Just click on it and make sure that we are submitting. So again, ladies, after you submit, make sure you're refreshing. So again, if you're refreshing, it's that it's like a circle with an arrow to refresh to make sure that all of your answers are submitted so that Miss Egging can grade. I hope you all have a fabulous weekend, and I miss you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.